So, how do you speak to that?
He's doing a great job, isn't he, Isabel?
He is doing a great job, and when you get a minority government, you have to make a lot of concessions, and that's what he's doing. And they are continuing to...
Okay, let me ask you this. Do you think that what he did was right with the power plants in Mississauga and with the power plants in Oakville? I mean, you don't just slap up a power plant overnight. Agreements are struck. Environmental assessments have to be done. I mean, look at the environmental assessment for light rail here in Ottawa. It took 2 years
And
just to do one environmental assessment. You can imagine what it must take for environmental protocols for a natural gas-fired power plant. And he sees that, you know, Charles Sousa's seat might be in trouble because there's opposition to this power plant. Laurel Broughton's seat in Etobicoke might be in trouble because of this power plant. Seats might be in trouble up in Oakville, where the power plant was $1 billion, and we don't even know what the cost of canceling. And lo and behold, two weeks before the election, he makes this promise that, okay, I'll cancel them. I mean, this doesn't show foresight.
So did Hudak and Horwath. They both promised it, and it was something that the local community...
They didn't get elected.
Well,
Dalton McGuinty did.
But they both promised that they would cancel that project.
But that's not the point.
What's the point?
The point is, he got elected. You see, the thing is, what happens is when you continuously do this, when this becomes a pattern, where you break contracts, or you sign contracts you shouldn't sign, and then have to live with it later, you send out a message to the investment community that you can't trust me, because you don't know whether or not I'm going to keep my word. And that does not bode well for the future economic reality here in Ontario. Not only that, but you have no idea what your power bill is going to be 5 years from now.
There was a lot of opposition to that particular one. That was a decision
that was opposition that was there for years.
I know, and so then they made that decision. So I think that was one where there was a lot of opposition. All of the opposition talked about it. They had to move it. They had to move forward on that one. So
okay.
I can't criticize.
This is being an expensive lunch bunch so far. $700 million in Orange, $180 million for power plants.
$500 million, because you have to rebuild the one for $300.
$180,000, that's pocket change for Elizabeth Whitmer, I guess.
200 jobs is going to be improved there. The total cost is $190 million. So it's not that
no, man, because you still have to rebuild the original power plant shut down.
What's the price per job? Okay, when we come back, wars with the doctors, wars with the teachers, wars with the nurses, wars with the unions. No, it's not Mike Harris, it's Dalton McGuinty. When we come back on CFRA.
The Lunch Bunch continues on News Talk Radio 580 CFRA.
Wars with the doctors, cutting the fees of the doctors, going to freeze the pay of the teachers, going to freeze the pay of the nurses, 440,000 other unionized members in the broader public service. You're going to freeze the pay of professors and teachers, everybody else. No, folks, we're not talking about Mike Harris. We're not taking a trip back in time. We're talking about Premier Dad, Dalton McGuinty. Isabell Metcalfe is our guest on the Lunch Bunch today. Loyal liberal, unwavering in her commitment to Dalton McGuinty. I mean, what's going on here, Isabel? I mean, this is a guy who has built his base on two things, healthcare and education. You talked about labor peace, and we've had labor peace. But you know what? This is going to be the summer of discontent.
I'm not seeing it yet. And as I said, 8 years of labor peace. 98% of the labor contracts in Ontario are now settled without disruptions. We have economic circumstances that we must work with within this province. Nobody wants to increase taxes. You just talked about that a moment ago. And so they're asking everybody to participate, and just keep remembering, 8 years of labor peace and 98% of labor contracts without disruption.
But what if they don't?
So what are you talking about, the 2%?
What if the unions say...
The 2% that haven't settled?
Well, it's 430,000 workers. That is pretty big.
Well,
and on the other side of the coin, you keep talking about how this labor peace has been, we have 8 years of labor peace. But that's a huge contributing factor to the massive debt and deficit that we carry every year. Labor peace at what cost is the question we asked before, and I come back to it. You cannot keep giving people more and more and more from the public purse and having punitive taxes levied against the people who actually write the check for the public service, the taxpayer. and through higher energy rates and higher fees. And so we had calls this morning where it cost somebody to get reassessed for the driver's license for medical conditions $600. If they fail, it's another $600 for mostly senior citizens. One guy had MS, had no effect on his ability to drive, cost him $600 to get his license. That's a tax. Now, when all this stuff is piled together, and then you sit there and say, we have 8 years of labor peace, that doesn't mean much to the guy walking down the street. It really doesn't.
Well, I'm just telling you that that's the reality, and they are working through all of these contracts piece by piece by piece, and asking that many of the unions take into consideration the circumstances that we're facing in this province.
But what if they don't? What if Dalton McGuinty suddenly faces the same kind of labor backlash that basically drove Mike Harris out of politics? Unions, are we going to see unions marching in the streets?
Well, we haven't seen it yet. There has been more disruption at the federal level. They support and honor the collective bargaining process. You haven't heard any of that kind of discussion. There always has to be discussion.
There was a statement last week from Dwight Duncan, the Minister of Finance, who said, look, if you don't agree to a wage freeze,
I don't recall you saying a wage freeze.
We will impose one on you. Well, no increase in the expense, in the wages that they pay. I mean, that's a wage freeze. He said, if you don't agree to one, we're going to legislatively impose one upon you.
And they have no choice, because if they don't, if we get downgraded again, the cost to service that debt is going to go through the roof. Rob knows a lot more about this than I do, but even I've got that part figured out.
The debt is a huge issue. The deficit is a huge issue. Both of them are huge issues. So we'll have to keep working through that.
But how? What are you going to do?
You continue to provide services to Ontario so that everyone can try and get ahead. You can continue to work carefully and constructively through the legislative process with the unions and continue to work on the budget. And he has worked very hard with both of his colleagues in opposition in order to provide balanced government for Ontario.
Okay, let's move on to some other things. Green energy. Dalton McGuinty is also a big fan of green energy.
Oh
man. What do you think about green energy, renewable energy, and how we've embraced this thing in Ontario? Do you think it's been a success, or?
Well, I think that like everything else, it's a program. It's working well. Ontarians like it. I do a little work for the solar industry. Ontarians have embraced it. If there's one thing that Canada has a lot of, it's a lot of sunshine.
Well, except when the sun goes down at 4:30 in the afternoon in the middle of winter.
I know, but the technology is moving. The rest of the world is moving into that. You want to have an energy mix. When was the last time you recall a blackout in Ontario? Many of us remember the blackouts.
That's not fair.
Not anymore.
And I'll tell you why that's not fair to make that comment. Because the reason we haven't had energy blackouts is not because we now have wind and solar. It's because the amount of actual, real hardcore, heavy industry jobs that used to take a lot of the energy are now gone. That's why we haven't had them.
Well, no, they've invested heavily in the infrastructure, particularly here in Eastern Ontario after the ice storm. There is new stuff that is coming in. It's modest, but it's still small. And the other point is that that's where young people want to go.
Well, where young people want to go is renewable. That is so besides the point. It's not even
people
funny.
want to sit home in their underwear and play Xbox too, Isabell. I mean,
you gotta go with the future.
But the future is not dictated by what people want. It's dictated by what the needs of the country and the province are, and that is not dictated by wants.
Let me ask you this, because I'm going to talk about the solar industry this afternoon on my show. You should tune in. You find it very insightful. Why is it that all these solar companies keep going bankrupt? There seems to be one that goes bankrupt
once a week.
Once a week. They're having a hard time competing with China.
Never mind what's going on in Europe.
That's a very big issue. That's a very big issue. That is in regards to the solar panels. It's a highly competitive world.
Right.
I think that one of the great dreams that we had was that we could incent our industry well enough. There's a lot of fantastic, like the Great Arise from Waterloo, Ontario, where they could do that innovation. Day 4, Dr. McDonald, there are a number that have tried to compete very aggressively. They were getting the technology there, they were doing all that kind of stuff, and then they were competing with China. Well, this is a tough tough
Okay.
environment.
Yeah, I understand that, but you know, one of the
we're at
companies.
least in the game.
I know one of the companies that I'm going to talk about this afternoon is a company called Canadian Solar Inc., which is based in Kitchener. Now, this is a company
Guelph.
that has Guelph. You're right.
Close enough.
Kitchener, Waterloo, Guelph, down in that area. It has 8,000 employees. 60 in Canada. All the rest are in China. That's where they make. You know, how does that create jobs in Canada?
Well, I actually know quite a bit about that. It's because of the innovation, and when government is trying to incent an industry, which is what they did with
They certainly are, yeah.
I know, but it also created an awful lot of jobs. There were
Really?
manufacturing jobs. Well, there were 300 jobs up in Arnprior.
Because we keep
at
hearing
the
20,000.
EDFEN project that went up there.
Because we keep hearing 20,000, and we can't find more than 600.
Well, you'll find them all over the place.
Okay,
I know of 300 in Arnprior that went together, and those are working jobs. Those are construction
Let me
workers.
ask you another question as related. Do you know who's the biggest group of people that pile onto this FIT program surrounding solar? Is there one particular group you can point to that said these guys really like this program?
Well, there was number one, an awful lot of Ontario people that wanted to have solar on their rooftop.
Okay, but I'm talking
there
about
were people
specific.
right here in our own community.
The answer
there
is
were a lot of
farmers.
guys that did very well.
The answer is farmers. They're the
Farmers,
ones.
yes.
Okay. Now, do you have any figures about how many acres are now under glass, under solar panels, and what effect that has on our ability to produce our own food?
Well, first of all, there isn't any on anything lower than Class 3. So Class 1, Class 2, Class 3 was all okay. So our very good prime agricultural land was just fine. There are lots of places here in Eastern Ontario. There are some of the biggest areas of sort of scrub land going.
You know how you
What's the matter with putting a solar plant up there? I think
Because
that's
what you
fantastic.
do is you take hundreds of acres out of
No,
production
but-
for things. Let me finish. Out of production for things like hay. And what do you feed cattle? You feed them hay. What do we eat? Cattle. So you're. I'm sorry. You just.
They just used. They couldn't use that kind of land.
All right,
news for you.
that's it. Isabel, I know you're probably happy to get out of here. I admire your loyalty.
I do too. I admire her courage.
I question your wisdom sometimes. You're welcome back anytime.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. It's
It's been fun.
Isabell Metcalfe, Nick Vandergragt, I'm Rob Snow, and I'm back at 2 o'clock, 580 CFRA.